Okay, let's take a look at the different type of web attacks and analyze those attacks one by one. So if you look at the OWASP, which stands for Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP is an organization which is looking at the different types of attacks that are being targeted towards the websites or towards web applications. Every year it releases a list of most common attacks on the web applications or on the websites. According to the 2017 analysis, these are the major attacks which are being targeted on the websites or on the web applications by the attackers globally. And you can see some of the most common types of attacks are the injection attack, the XSS attacks or cross-site scripting attacks, CSRF attacks or cross-site request forgery attacks. So these are the different types of attacks which can be, and a few others as well. These are the different types of attacks which can be targeting any website or web application. In the next few slides, we are going to look at some of these attacks in a little bit more detail. So first of all, which are the most common ones and probably the most difficult ones to understand. So let's take a look at these attacks in detail one by one. First of all, we are going to look at the injection vulnerabilities or the injection attacks. In injection attacks, the concept is, or the strategy of the attacker is to inject code into the traffic which is being sent to the web server, and unknowingly the web server or the traffic is sent to the interpreter, which includes the executable code, and that executable code is dangerous, is malicious, and it can make the application perform undesirable tasks. So as it is written here, as you can see, that the essence of injection vulnerability is to obfuscate data or send confusing data or send unclear data, and this data can execute the code through the interpreter, and this executable code can damage your application or harm your application. SQL injection attack is one of the most common injection attacks in the industry. It can result in SQL injection attack, or for that matter any injection attack can result in data loss, data damage, DDoS attacks, or it can corrupt your databases. So a lot of dangerous things or a lot of unwanted things can happen because of injection vulnerabilities and injection attacks, specifically the SQL injection attacks, which as you can see is the most common form of injection attack. So let's take a look at the SQL injection attack. In SQL injection attack, normally what happens is that the user, the hacker, instead of sending normal input, for example, instead of sending username, password to the application, what it does is that it sends SQL executable commands to the database server. As soon as these executable commands are sent to the server will respond, or the server will execute these commands and respond to these commands, and potentially what can happen is that the server might actually send the complete database. If it's, for example, a username password database, the server might respond, or server might send the complete database contents to the hacker. So it can be very dangerous, and it can be extremely undesirable to have this SQL injection attack on your web server. The reason for why the SQL injection attack happens is when we do not sanitize or we do not extensively check the input which is being received from the user. So in order to avoid this attack, we need to make sure that we check the input which is coming from the attacker, so that we know that this is an attack traffic and this is not ordinary traffic. This is attack traffic which can actually be executed using the SQL language on the database. We need to be careful, and we need to check that input when we are receiving this input from the user. This is how this attack is carried out step by step. The attacker is going to check whether the vulnerability exists. If the vulnerability exists, it is going to check the database type so that it can send the appropriate command. So based on the database command, it can obtain the database data, and eventually it can escalate the privileges as well. So this is how the attack is going to unfold. in case of SQL injection. These are the steps, or this is the step-by-step process of generating the attack. One other major type of attacks is the XSS attack, or the cross-site scripting attacks. Cross-site scripting attack is also known as the session hijacking attack. One of the major types of session hijacking attacks is actually XSS. What happens in XSS is that an attacker is going to use the trust developed between the user and the website it exploits the trust, and then it can use the user's trust to access the website and get valuable information or escalate the privileges or generate the attack on the website. There are two types of XSS attacks. One is called the reflected XSS and the other one is called the stored XSS attack. These are the two major types of XSS or cross-site scripting attacks, or we can say session hijacking attacks. Let's take a look at these two types of attacks one by one. The first type of attack is the reflected XSS attack. In this attack, what happens is once the user has logged in to the web server or the web application server, the hacker, by making the user click on a link on a forum or anywhere, is going to request the server to send a cookie, generate a session ID, and the session ID is going to be generated, and the server is going to respond or send back the session information in the form of a cookie, which is going to be stored by the user. And because the user's computer or PC has been compromised, the user is going to send the cookie information or the session token information or the session ID information, which is stored in the browser, is going to be sent to the attacker, and using that session ID information, the attacker is going to hijack the user's session, because now the attacker knows the session tokens which were sent to the user by the server. So it is going to hijack the session, and it is going to use those tokens to log into the server, and the server will think that this original user or this genuine user is actually logging in. So this attacker has actually hijacked the user's session, and now the attacker can access the server. The server will believe this is the user, and the attacker can do whatever it wants to the server using the privileges and the rights of this user. So this concept is called session hijacking, and this is the reflected XSS attack, where the attacker is not sitting in the server, or the malicious code is not sitting in the server, and the attacker is using the client to access the server, or makes the client click some link, and then it can access the server. Similarly, the stored XSS attack is where the server has already been compromised. The attacker submits a question that contains the known JavaScript. So whenever the user logs into the server's pages, web pages, have already been contaminated by the server, by the attacker, and the script is going to be run or sent to the user. The user is going to run that script, generate or copy the session tokens and send them to the attacker. Now the attacker can actually use these credentials to attack the server. So in this case, the user didn't even have to click on a link. It just logged into the server and was forced to send its session token information to the attacker, and now the attacker can use the session to log into the server and actually do whatever it wants on the server. If you look at an example of XSS attacks, it will be clear that what the hacker does is that the hacker embeds something in the link whenever the user and advertises that link to a blog website, for example. When the user clicks on that link contains the code, the hacker's code, malicious code, and it's presented with, let's say, a username, password, and the user will log into the website giving its username, password, thinking that it is requesting to be logged in again, and this information will go to the attacker, and the attacker can now has the username, password, or the login or session information of the client, and it can access the server pretending to be the client. This is the typical example, a typical case of session hijacking. So in this case, the attacker is pretending to be a client and is attacking the server or accessing the server. Similar to this attack is what we call the CSRF, cross-site request forgery. In this case, this is also called a one-click attack or session riding. In this case, what happens is that the attacker has already accessed the websites and has already inserted its malicious code into a website or a web application. So whenever a user logs into the website, the site establishes a trust relationship, or the client establishes the trust relationship with the website. But however, since the website has been compromised and the attacker's code is sitting on the website, the attacker through the website can access the user's browser and steal its information, steal its username, password information, for example, and can do whatever it wants on the website. So for example, this is what can happen, that when a user logs into a genuine or a real website A, it gives its username, password and cookies generated where its username, password information is stored, or the session ID information is stored. Without logging out of the website A, or for example a bank website, the user establishes a connection, or user is tricked into establishing or logging into website B, which is a hacker's website, which is a malicious website. This website is going to send a request through this user to this original website. As you can see, the browser uses the preceding cookies to access the website A based on the request from website B. So the hacker is sending a request through using website B to the user, and the user's session, or the user's established session with website A, is being used for sending a request to perform certain function on the website A. So if it's a bank's website, the hacker can send a request through the user to this bank website to transfer, let's say, $1,000 to the hacker's bank account. So in this way, the hacker has used this session to steal the user information and perform certain tasks on this website, on the bank website or any trusted website. So this is how CSRF, or cross-site request forgery attacks, are carried out on the client to PCs or through the client PCs. Similarly, if we look at the different web security defense methods, there are different types of attacks. For example, there are attacks which are focusing or targeting the web architecture. There are attacks which are targeting the weaknesses of the web languages, and there are attacks which are targeting the weaknesses of the communication channels. So these attacks are basically targeting the code of conduct. These attacks are basically targeting the application defense weaknesses, and these attacks are targeting the communication infrastructure, or targeting to have a denial of service situation. So we need to make sure that we defend against these attacks, defend against the web language attacks, and defend against the communication channel attacks. So now that we understand the different types of attack, we look at different defense mechanisms that can be used for protecting our web applications and our websites against these attacks, or basically defending our infrastructure against the web attacks. So in the next video, we are going to look at the different types of defense mechanisms for protecting ourselves against web attacks.